Welcome in, everybody. Jason Priester, Clemson Insider, back at it tonight as we do every Monday night right here, 7 p.m. Appreciate everybody that's tuned in. Appreciate everybody that has tuned in previous weeks. Big thanks, big shout out to everybody. Man, we have just set viewership records the last 2 weeks in a row. I mean, actually just shattered them. So appreciate everybody that jumps on and joins in, even if you don't comment, just watch, just listen, whatever. We very much appreciate it. I know I do. I know my sponsor does. A Glass, 2 locations in the PD, one in Florence, one in Sumter. All your auto glass needs. They do replacement, repair. Get yourself a free quote today. myaglass.com. A Glass for when you need a glass. For all of those who needed to hear it from the school before you believed it, well, now it is finally official. Clemson released it today. They're moving on from Wes Goodwin. We'll see where he ends up, if he ends up anywhere, what the future has in store for him. But it is now official. We put it out there. Golly, I don't even remember how long ago it was now. I mean, and we had it confirmed then. Um, but there's always going to be some that not going to believe it until they see it from the school, and that's okay too. Now everybody can be on the same page. Question becomes, who does Dabo Swinney, hire to replace Wes, or any other moves made? Because if let's say you bring in a defensive coordinator that coaches safeties, then you got to do something with your safeties coach. If you bring one that coaches cornerbacks, you got to figure out something with your cornerbacks coach. If you know what I'm getting at here. And let's say you bring in one that doesn't coach linebackers, then you would need to still address that and hire somebody to coach linebackers. So still some ongoing questions out there, and I do not have the answers for them. We put out some names that we've heard could be potential candidates, and we stand by those names, and those are still the names that I've heard. Not really. I get asked about the guy at Texas a lot, and I've just not really heard anything of substance with him. The ones that we've heard and put out were the Franks guy at Tennessee, Leonard, who was with the Broncos, Allen at Penn State, Bryant Haynes at Indiana, and Santucci at Georgia Tech. Those are kind of the names we heard. And, the Franks thing, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the guy that originally floated his name out there as a candidate, he covers Clemson now, but he used to cover Tennessee, so he's kind of plugged in over there, and he would have the sources to know, from that side of the equation. So I always thought that was a name that had some legs to it. It's been pretty well publicized that he's been coaching this season without a new contract in place for next year. He's already turned down the Miami defensive coordinator job. I think that was put out yesterday or today. But we'll see, where it goes. To me, you're going to have – it doesn't matter who the hire is. Some people are going to be disappointed or upset. But to me, that's a pretty solid list. And if you can land one guy off of that list, I think you're in pretty good hands. Also got a big transfer visiting tomorrow. Jeremiah Alexander, former 5-star, who Clemson recruited hard coming out of high school in the 2022 class, visited in the summer of 2021, I think it was. And, he left that visit with, there was a lot of people at Clemson thought they were going to land him. He kind of, based on some things I've been told, he kind of led them to believe he was coming. And he gets back home, and shortly thereafter, he commits to Alabama, actually recommits to Alabama, because he had been committed to Alabama previously before that. Hasn't seemed to field a whole lot there at Alabama outside of special teams. But that's a guy you're familiar with. You absolutely take a run at him. based on the history and see what happens. Said he's still going to visit Ohio State, Ole Miss and Oklahoma. And when Clemson was recruiting him, that's when Venables was still at Clemson and Todd Bates was still at Clemson, and both of those guys are at Oklahoma. The hope would be that you could get him on campus and seal the deal tomorrow. Don't mean that's what's going to happen, but you absolutely hope it plays out that way. Classes are set to start. I forget what day it is. One day this week, you want to get him enrolled in class as quickly as possible. He doesn't have to be enrolled on the first day, but there's a window there for those guys. But the sooner the better. And with Clemson, kind of having some unknowns at linebacker behind Sammy Brown and Wade Woodaz, I've made it no secret that I think linebacker's still a spot they kind of need to look at in the portal. Wouldn't hurt to add another defensive end, and maybe this guy can give you one of those. Clemson recruited him as a defensive end coming out of high school. He's played linebacker in that scheme in Alabama, which was more of a 3-4 when he got there, and I think they kind of changed over to a 4-3 in DeBoer's first year. But like I said, he hasn't seen the field a lot, mostly on special teams. And I've noticed people just looking at his stats and saying, why go after him? Kid's got a ton of upside. If you get him and he doesn't do anything, hey, no harm, no foul. But you at least take a shot because he might be one of those guys that just kind of benefits from a change in scenery, change in scheme, a fresh start somewhere else. So we'll see how it plays out. But one thing's for certain, absolutely shows that Dabo's kind of still open to adding another piece or two out of the portal. And again, I think linebacker's definitely a spot that might need to be looked at. Basketball gets another win Saturday. Take care of business against Cal. Another slow start. I got to find a way to get out of the habit of having those slow starts. But to be fair, Victor Locken did not play in the first half. Clemson only led by 3 at the half after Cal banked in a 3-pointer at the break. But they kind of took control in the second half. They had plenty of opportunities to take control in that first half. Turned the ball over too many times. I think Cal had 12 points off turnovers in the first half, but got some of that cleaned up, and they totally look like a different team with Locken on the floor. No disrespect to Christian Reeves. He's just not quite there yet. They're different when Locken's on the floor, and he didn't even take a shot in that game, but he still had a tremendous impact on the way it played out in the second half, just with his presence on the defensive end. How much does Goodwin's buyout affect the search? I don't think it does. Him being fired means Clemson's on the hook for his salary. Comes out to 3.1. I think it was 1.5 for next year and 1.6 the year after. 3.1 in total. He takes another job, whatever his salary is, kind of mitigates some of that. It'll come off of what is owed. But I don't think it, even if he goes home and doesn't coach for 2 years and collects checks, I don't think it impacts Clemson's search for a coach either way. They can afford to go out and hire who they want to hire. Just looking at some of the list of these candidates, or some of these candidates that we've been hearing thrown around, they're not going to come cheap. You look at a guy like Banks from Tennessee, he's not going to come cheap. You're going to have to pay. I would definitely not expect this to be somewhere Clemson kind of looks to go the cheap route on to save a few bucks. The fact that they fired Goodwin, and they're willing to pay that buyout shows you they are not going to settle for being anything less than what they expect on the defensive side of the ball, and they will pay whatever they have to. I don't think it impacts it one way or the other. Where are we getting these rumors from in regards to DC? Are they reputable sources? It depends on where you get your news from. I can't speak for anybody else. I can speak for us at the website that I work for, and we do not just throw a list of names together just because that's who we want to see hired. we got sources, and that's where a lot of that stuff comes from. Now, I can't speak for anything else you've seen anywhere else. There are some reputable websites out there that I can say with 100% certainty they do the same thing we do. And then there are some others out there that do not. Um, so all I can say is be careful where you get your news from. You know, if you're getting it from TigerNet or TCI or Tiger Illustrated or 24/7, those are some of the sites off the top of my head that are reputable. But yeah, I can only speak for some of the names that we've put out there, and I can tell you they're sourced. They're not just a list of potential candidates that we're just kind of throwing out there to see what sticks. Now, does that mean one of those guys is going to be the next defensive coordinator? No, it might be somebody that we've not even heard of. Just go back to when Brandon Streeter got fired and how quickly that thing developed with Garrett Riley. Not that I think this one's going to play out that way. I think this is going to take a little bit more time. But again, it's not people aren't, if you see names thrown about from some of these reputable websites, they're not just throwing names out there just because they're trying to see so something sticks. They've been working sources, and that's the feedback they're getting. Glad you're on. Had to get off sports talk where it was pick on Clemson night. Yeah, I got a text from a friend of mine a little while ago that said, what did it say? Telling me I needed to call in the sports talk to set them straight with some misinformation. Yeah, I have no idea what they were saying, and the guy was halfway joking. Don't get me wrong. But I like Phil. Phil's a good guy, man. Tell you a quick story to tell you exactly what kind of guy Phil is. Not long after I had started on the beat, it might have been my first year as a credentialed member of the media. It was a night game. I can't remember what game it was, but it was late, and it was foggy as crap. And we leave out the stadium after Dabo's done with his post game interview. We all leave at different times depending on what we have to do after he's done. And I walk back to the car, get in the car, put it in reverse, go to back out, bam, bumped into a car. I had no idea whose it was. Nobody out there. So I had to sit there and wait because I wasn't just going to pull off, man, because it looked like there was some damage on the front corner of the car. I think I ended up having to wait like 30, 45 minutes. I started to leave a note, but with how foggy it was there was so much moisture in there, I didn't think he'd be able to read it by the time he got to the car. So I decided to just wait. Turns out it was Phil's car. And man, he was so surprised that I sat there and waited on him. And he was like, "Oh man, that damage was already there." I think he said his wife did it, but he could have easily been a butt about that thing, man. But he was just as cool as cucumbers, and we had a pretty good laugh about it. And feels a pretty stand up dude. Why don't we go after Ted Roof? He's got ACC ties. He's got a lot of experience, man. I'm not even sure where Ted Roof's at now. I know he got fired by Brand at Oklahoma. For this season, yeah, whenever it was, I forget. Maybe after his first season, I can't remember, and then replaced by Zach Alley. But I just think Dabo wants to go after somebody a little younger. Just kind of based on some of the things I've heard. Roof's obviously been around, man. He's a veteran. Golly, I can't even begin to count how many schools he's coached at. And he's had a lot of success over the years, and there will always be Oklahoma fans that probably hold it against him for how their defense performed while he was in charge of, when really, BV's kind of in charge of that thing over there, and he runs the show on that side of the ball. But I just think he wants to go after somebody a little bit younger, if I want to be brutally honest. Love that Dabo still has that fire to get another ring. Yeah, I've said it plenty of times on here, man, that I just don't think, people just assume that he's gotten complacent and he doesn't have the same drive or will to win anymore that he used to. And maybe to some degree, subconsciously, a little complacency settled in, during that playoff run. But that guy, man, I can tell you, I've been around him enough to know nobody wants to win more than that guy. Does every move he makes works out? Does every move he work out? I can't even say it right. Is every hire he's made, have they worked out? No. I do think he probably hired a little too much inexperience on the offensive side of the ball at one time, or in a short amount of time, and ended up with a lot of young, inexperienced coaches on that side of the ball. But we've seen now in the past couple of years that he's willing to go out and rectify that and try to make it right. Bringing in Garrett Riley, moving on from Streeter after just 1 year, probably. I bet if he had to do that all over again, he'd have made that decision a year earlier, because that Clemson's offense needed revamping. It had gotten stale. It was kind of archaic. And I just don't know that Streeter was the guy to do that. You needed to bring somebody in with fresh eyes and fresh perspective who hadn't been running the same offense for a decade. But then last year he goes out and fires Thomas Austin, who, played for him, played at Clemson, very close. I mean, same thing with Streeter. Heck, the guys, there's a Brandon Streeter Award at Clemson. There's a award named after him there. That he is the epitome, the utter definition of what a Clemson guy is. And, he had to fire both those guys, and probably not easy decisions, but you look at who he replaced them with, and, the evidence is pretty clear. He still has that drive. He still has that will to win. And, this is just another example of that. There's a lot of people that believe that hiring Goodwin as defensive coordinator was some huge mistake. And maybe in hindsight it was, but, his first 2 years, those defenses, it ain't like they were terrible. They ranked inside the top 10 in a bunch of categories last year and the year before last. It just fell off a cliff for whatever reason this year. We can speculate on why until the cows come home. But when you have a standard in place, the way Clemson does when it comes to playing defense, and you fail to meet that standard by as much as they failed to meet it this year, I don't know that you have any choice but to make a change. Probably, I guarantee it was another one of those gut-wrenching decisions, but sometimes you have to do what you have to do. And I've lost count of how many times. Most of the time he's talking about the portal when he says it, but I mean, how many times has Dabo Swinney said, "I'll do what's best for Clemson"? And, I believe he always does what he feels is best for Clemson. It might always work out that way. And when it doesn't, he circles back and does what he can to fix it. I've already seen some comments in here in favor of Leonard. Somebody's asking me about Banks. Now we got one say, "I'd like to see Clemson get Santucci." I like Santucci. I think he is intriguing. Doesn't have a ton of experience as a defensive coordinator, but he's definitely aggressive. And that, considering what Georgia Tech, what he had to work with there at Georgia Tech, that defense was pretty solid this year. Can't say he would be at the top of my list of guys, of names that I've heard. But again, like I said earlier, I think you're good with any of those guys, man. I don't think you could go wrong with any of them. And Santucci's on that list. He's young, he's energetic. He's like all these other guys. He'd bring a fresh perspective, and he coaches linebackers, so you wouldn't necessarily have to make a move with one of your other staff guys if you didn't have to. You could just slide right into the role West was in and be done. So, yeah, I like Santucci, man. Again, I like all the guys I named earlier. Never understood why if you recruit someone and you don't keep the relationship, if they choose another school. I think what you're saying, I think I understand what you're saying here. But yeah, I mean, if I'm understanding you correctly, this would kind of, them coming back, circling back to Alexander now that he's in the portal, would just kind of be evidence of staff keeping that relationship intact. Not saying that they've, been in all this contact since he's been at Alabama. But if you can build that relationship while you're recruiting him, then you have, especially now in the portal era where guys jump around so often, if a guy you recruited hard and you really liked coming out of high school, decides, hey, I made the wrong choice originally. I need to leave and go somewhere else. You can circle back to him, man, and those relationships are something you can lean on. And I think that gives Clemson a leg up here, man. I don't want to get too far out ahead of myself here, but I really like their chances here. Again, you'd like to see them get it done before he leaves campus on Tuesday. Not saying it'll play out that way, and not saying they won't get him if they don't get it done before he leaves campus. I'm just saying that's best case scenario. Because, Ole Miss is a school that likes to throw money around. Oklahoma, he's got relationships there too, but not sure that Alexander is a guy that's going to be demanding or commanding some huge payday anyways based off his production so far. But we'll see how it plays out. But absolutely, man, when you got a guy like Alexander who you recruited so hard coming out of high school and he jumps in the portal and he's willing to give you another look, man, you lean on those relationships you originally established for sure. What happened with Trey Williams? Pretty quick commitment. I can't sit here and tell you for sure what happened. I'll say this. Sometimes you gotta decide if a guy is worth what he's asking for. And if you can't, meet in the middle or whatever, you gotta decide, hey, well, we're just not willing to spend that much, and maybe somebody else is. He had set that Michigan thing up fairly quickly. After he entered the portal officially, that was probably already in the works before he got in the portal, if you want to know the truth. But yeah, to me, that's what it comes down to sometimes. Maybe a guy's asking for this much and you say, hey, we don't feel like, we want to spend that much on this guy. Well, so-and-so's offering me this much. You going to match it? Nah, we're not going to, man. If you want to walk, walk. And I'm not saying that's what played out here. But it absolutely does happen, and I can see that being the case here. Yes, definitely not the first slow start Clemson's had. Matter of fact, they've had a couple in a row, and they've had a few so far this season. We'll see. That was something. Matter of fact, that was something Brownell talked about after the game Saturday night. He talked about it today during the weekly, conference call with basketball coaches. He didn't really have an answer for it, but it is something that is going to end up biting him in the butt if they don't get it straightened out, because at some point you're going to get in a hole too deep to climb yourself out of. What do I think about Phil Parker? I think he's fine. He's not a name I've heard, but I mean, I think he's a really good defensive coordinator. We'll see if anything transpires there, but he's not a name that I've personally heard. We need to go after the Georgia linebacker that just entered the portal. I don't know what Georgia linebacker just entered the portal, but you know, you got one that's coming to visit tomorrow, and I'd have to know who it is first, and the reason why he's leaving, and I can't really comment on that. You never know why a guy's entering the portal, and just because a guy's entering the portal don't mean he's one you need to go after. There's a lot of factors that go into those things. Money being a big one. Read into Tennessee defensive coordinator. Not sure he would be a step up, more so a lateral move. Yeah, well, he's done really good things with that Tennessee defense. They were pretty good this year. They've you look at some of the numbers, they were pretty good. I don't really have a pecking order of these guys, but Banks would probably be in the upper half for me. I've seen so many people say in the past few days, why are we going after a guy that just got spanked by Ohio State? And I'm not saying that's what you're saying, just saying in general. But you find a defensive coordinator that's never had his tail waxed before, and you might be looking for a while. But it's like I said earlier, though, man. It doesn't matter who it is. There's gonna be some people that are disappointed and think it's not the splashy of splashy as high as it should have been. We'll just see. We'll see what happens, but I think Banks has done a pretty good job there at Tennessee. Flight aware season is. Somebody's got in the comments about the volume going in and out. Is anybody else having trouble with the audio? I'm working with a new mic here, so if you have any audio issues, let me know. Yeah, there are a lot of people that are going to be tracking flights here over the next couple of weeks. There are a lot of people that have already been tracking flights. But you never know who's on those planes and who's not. Yeah, it is definitely flight tracking season for sure. Any truth to the rumor of Clemson losing the DB coach? I really hope it's not true. I assume you're talking about Mike Rudy coaches the corners. I have not heard that. I have seen that from, I've seen that out there. I guess other people have put it out there. I have not personally heard that. Now, does that mean that he couldn't decide to leave on his own? Or if they hire a guy that coaches corners, if he might not have to leave. There's still some things in play here that could affect that. But no, I think if Dabo was going to make a move with anybody else, just flat out move on from them, he would have done that already. It would have been in the release today. The staff actually reconvened today for the first time since Dabo's been gone on vacation. But no, I have not heard anything about Mike Reed just getting flat out fired. But again, that doesn't mean he isn't able to leave on his own. He's been at Clemson for a long time. And I don't know. I'm just throwing hypotheticals out there now, so don't take this as something that's actually happened. But maybe he's a guy that wants to be a defensive coordinator, and it looks like Dabo's going to go out and make an outside hire here, and not promote from within. Maybe he decides to move on for that reason, or again, maybe they hire a defensive coordinator who specializes in coaching corners. Then what you do? Then you have you got to make a move somewhere. You got to do something. So I don't think any of that stuff is fully worked out yet, but no, I do not think Mike Reed's just getting outright fired. That guy, I've said it 100 times, that guy is one of the best cornerback coaches in the country. Just look how many draft picks he has produced. Look how many first round picks he's produced. He's really good at what he does. That's a guy. If you're a Clemson fan, man, if you lose that guy, that's not good. But at the same time, it depends on who you're replacing with too. But and I know that Dabo really likes Mike Reed. Sometimes when you're out there at practice, you can tell exactly how much respect he's got from Mike Reed, because it's just Mike Reed in his corners, and nobody else is over there doing what he does. Yeah, that to me, if you lose that guy, that's a blow. Two weeks top. Yeah, elite retreats on January 25th. If you're Dabo, you absolutely want to have somebody in place by then. Do I think it's absolutely necessary to have already done it by then? Probably not, but you probably want to have it done before that. You especially want to have a linebackers coach in place. Depending on who you're bringing up in that week. I have not confirmed any linebackers that are going to be in town yet, but I imagine there will be some, and they will absolutely want to know who's going to be coaching them. But most of those guys, man, there's still a long ways to go in their recruitment. They're not going to make any decisions until summer at the earliest, after they take officials. So, I mean, this is just the next step in the recruiting process for pretty much all of those guys. I mean, I don't think it's, devastating if you don't have him in place by then. But, yeah, sure, you'd like to have it done. Do you know who's recruiting Jeremiah Alexander, since Goodwin and the linebackers coach won't be? It's probably a team effort, if I had to guess. I actually probably could ask him that, but I didn't think about it. Again, it's like I said a minute ago, you'd like to at least, have an idea of who it's going to be if you're a recruit. But remember, Clemson recruited him as a defensive end coming out of high school. So, I mean, it's not some guarantee that he's going to be a linebacker if he were to choose Clemson. Because I still think ends a place they could use another guy, especially since Hoffler bolted for Georgia Tech. But, as far as who the lead recruiter is, I don't know. It might be Dabo might be leading the charge on that thing. It'll probably be a team effort. Once he gets there tomorrow, though, all those guys will be there. I don't think it's so much. I wouldn't worry so much more about who's recruiting him as I would be about not being able to tell him who's position coach is going to be. There it is. I told you, it don't matter who it is. Somebody's going to be unhappy. Those are the names I've heard, man. I mean, I don't know what's so wrong with those names. There's some pretty impressive names. There's some pretty good defensive coaches on that list. You are the first person that I have run across that does not like any of them. I have not found one person that does not like the idea of Jim Leonhard being hired. Not one. You are the first. But there's always that one. big basketball game tomorrow night. I mean, I guess that depends on your definition of big. Clemson's 4-0 in the ACC. If they go on the road and lose to Louisville tomorrow, is it gonna, be some devastating loss? No. Louisville's playing really good at the moment. That's gonna be a tough one to go out and win on the road. Definitely not one you want to have one of those slow starts in for sure. But see if they can even get there. Some of the weather and stuff out there. It didn't sound like they were too worried about that earlier today. But yeah, that's gonna be a tough. That's gonna be a tough challenge, man. Because Louisville is playing really well. They kind of blew. I think they played North Carolina over the weekend, right? And won kind of convincingly. Strength and conditioning seems to be lacking. Is it time for new blood? Now, I have, heard some hints that there could be some shakeup there, and we'll see what happens. The same guy runs the department now that has been running it since before Dabo got hired. So it's not like they've made a change in coaching there, or at least in the head coach there. In the past few years, that's come in and made some kind of change that, impacts things. Now Joey Batson has had some health issues in recent years. Who knows? He's been around a long time. Maybe he decides he's done. We'll see what happens. But you're not the only one that thinks something's off in that department. I'll put it that way. Kind of surprised Dabo didn't have a guy in place when he made the announcement on the right. Kind of surprised Dabo didn't have a guy in place when he made the announcement. I guess you're saying like he did with the Riley hire. Sometimes you can't always do it that way. Maybe he had somebody in mind and has not been able to lock him up. Maybe who he has in mind is still coaching. There's a lot of possibilities there. Again, they probably, Dabo's statement today said that they informed Wes last night. They've known for a while. Wes has known before last night. They might have been trying to wait to see if Wes wanted to stay on in an analyst role because, from my understanding, that was still an option. But as far as not having somebody in place already, there's some things. Sometimes things can factor into that are out of your control. But I understand what you're saying, because usually, if you go back to the way that Streeter and got fired and Riley was hired, that was pretty much a done deal all at the same time. But you can't always do it that way. What about Jeff Hafley at Green Bay? I've not heard his name either. I'm a big Jeff Hafley fan, though. He kind of got frustrated with the way the game, the college game has evolved and which direction it's headed, and his inability to, get talent at Boston College. That's the reason why he left and is in the NFL right now. I don't know that he's got any desire to come back and play that game again at this level. I got asked about Marion Hobby earlier today because he was let go by the Bengals. He's been in the NFL for a while. Part of the reason why he went to the NFL is because he got tired of the recruiting grind. You're always recruiting, and the recruiting game has changed a lot since he's left the college sport. I'm not sure Hafley would have any interest in coming back to the collegiate level. I love some sport talk hosts in the state now being disappointed Dabo is using the portal. I think it's a win-win situation. Well, at least one of those. I think Phil does a pretty good job. Clemson fans think he's a closet Gamecock fan. South Carolina fans thinks he's a closet Clemson fan. So when you got both sides thinking of you that way, you're doing a pretty good job covering your bases when it comes to bias. There's some other guys over there that are South Carolina fans. And, Dabo and Clemson, having never signed a transfer until this year, gives you something to talk about. A lot of days in the offseason on those slow news days. Now you got to come up with some new material. But I imagine that if you're a South Carolina fan, you're probably hoping that Dabo never does dip his toes into the portal. So there might be a guy or two over there that is disappointed in that regard. I don't have anything new on Capehart. Last I heard, he was leaning towards entering the draft. I remember right before he got hurt that I had heard that he was gone. He had already thought he did enough. But again, that was right before he got hurt, and then he missed pretty much the rest of the season. Didn't play much against South Carolina or SMU. I can't remember how many snaps he had versus Texas. But I lean towards thinking he's NFL bound. I have not heard anything about any other coaching changes, special teams or otherwise. It's just the defensive stuff is still up in the air right now. I haven't heard anything about special teams guys. Is it confirmed that the entire offensive staff stays at least another year? Some early rumors about Spiller once the coaching news was starting. Based on what I've been told, those guys are safe. Now we'll see if it plays out that way. And that was based off something that I heard before Dabo went on vacation. Maybe he changes his mind. But I feel like if he was going to make a move with any of those guys on the offensive staff, it would have been announced at the same time today. Does that mean for sure that nothing else is coming? No. But I just feel like they would have made those announcements all at the same time. But maybe if you're going to make a move with those guys, you decide to wait until you got the replacement in place. But again, I was told that everybody on the offensive side was safe. And that was before he went on vacation, though. Is Goodwin a scapegoat for players who haven't performed up to their star ratings? I don't think so. I think the linebackers have regressed under Goodwin every year he's been here. I think the defensive, if you look at the defensive stats, even though, outside of the pass defense, which made a marked improvement from his first year to his second year, a lot of them, you've seen them regress, and a bunch of them fell off the cliff this year. Players not play, having Sammy Brown on the bench the entire fourth quarter against South Carolina has nothing to do with players not performing at their star ratings. Do I think the defensive tackles underperformed some this year? Absolutely. Is that a Nick Eason issue or is that a scheme issue? I don't think we know the answer to that. I don't think Goodwin's approach on defense was nearly as aggressive as what we used to see when Venables was at Clemson. It was not nearly as the number of blitzes were down. The aggressiveness just wasn't there at the same level. I think a lot of the defensive issues have been scheme wise. That doesn't mean that there haven't been some guys that haven't played up to their star ratings. But I've said this plenty of times before. Different guys develop at different paces, and particularly on the back end of that defense, there's a lot of younger guys. There's a lot of younger guys up front too, outside of Trey Williams and Peyton Page. Even Peter Woods is only in his second year. There's a lot of underclassmen in that defensive tackles room. And at defensive end, I just don't think he got a whole lot to work with. I think it was T.J. Parker and kind of everybody else, and the gap was wide. Bringing in Will absolutely helps that, but I wouldn't, again, what if Will Helt or T.J. Parker get hurt next year? It would not, I if I'm Clemson and I'm on that staff, I'm still open to adding another guy there, and maybe that's what they're doing here with Alexander, because again, that's what they recruited him as coming out of high school. We'll see if that's what their plan is for him, if they can land him. Maybe that's something they don't decide until he gets there, if they land him. Any possibility in Dabo having a go again with co-defense coordinators? Again, I doubt it. And, does anybody view Mickey Khan as a defensive coordinator at Clemson? Because he's got the co-defensive coordinator title right now. I don't. A lot of times when you see those co-labels, it's more about getting them a raise than it is about responsibility. So no, I think he's going to go outside and hire somebody, and there will be one defensive coordinator. Best thing that ever happened to Clemson was West Virginia and the Orange Bowl. That resulted in Dabo getting rid of Steele for Venables. Hopefully, last 3 games of this year will be remembered as the same. It resulted in more than that. And I'm not gonna dive into all that here, but there were several changes that were made inside the program on top of getting of Kevin Steele being replaced. That resulted from the tail whipping they took in that game. Who do I personally like so far in the defensive coordinator search, or who would JP hire if he was defensive coordinator? Again, the names I've heard are Allen from Penn State, Bryant Haynes from Indiana, Tim Banks from Tennessee, Santucci from Georgia Tech, Jim Leonard, who is currently with the Broncos. If it was my choice, I kind of like all of them. To be quite honest, I see the advantages with all of them. I really like the idea of Leonard, and I kind of like the idea of Franks. That would probably be 1A and 1B for me. Leonard's done a lot of good things, but the thing about him is he's not a 4-3 guy, and Dabo's kind of always been a 4-3 guy. So he would have to adapt his scheme at least for a year to kind of fit the personnel Clemson's got. That I'm just assuming that anyways. But Again, I'm a big fan of Santucci's. He doesn't have a lot of defense coordinator experience yet, so he'd probably be closer to the bottom of my list. But I mean, I certainly wouldn't be butthurt if he was the guy that was hired. There's a lot to like about him, and Allen there at Penn State's done a lot of good things while he's been a different defensive coordinator. The stops he's been at. I don't know as much about Bryant Haynes though as the rest of those guys. He'd probably be at the bottom of my list at this point. But if I had to pick two, I'd probably go Leonard and Banks as 1A and 1B. What happened with Sammy Brown? What as Kobe, Cooper Taylor, etc. Now that West is gone, Dabo waited till the portal closed to make the change. I don't think anything's going to happen with any of those guys based on West being gone. They knew that West was gone long before the portal closed. Well, I shouldn't say long before, but before the portal closed, it was known that West was not coming back. So if some reporters knew it, some of the people inside that building knew it. They might not have been officially told until the day, but when you make a move like that, it starts to get out, and especially inside that building over there, I have no doubt some of those guys already knew it. But I don't think it impacts any of them, unless the guy you hire comes in and somebody just flat out doesn't get along with them and they don't like each other or whatever. Maybe that, if that happens, then you see somebody move on. But just because West is being replaced, I don't see anybody leaving because of that. Hiring a new DC won't necessarily solve all of Clemson's defensive issues. I think that is a legitimate question. I think a new scheme could possibly fix some of the things, but I do think Clemson suffered mightily from not having another, legitimate run-stopping defensive end opposite T.J. Parker. And like I said earlier, I think the linebackers have just regressed each year under Wes. I think Barrett Carter was not as good this year as he was last year. I don't think he was as good. It's just all those guys. But yeah, I think that's a legitimate question. Does a new defensive coordinator coming in fix everything? I don't know. It might. It might end up being, that there was just some disconnect. I don't even know if that's the right word to use because I think everybody got along and everything. But it might turn out that a different scheme helps bring out the best in some of those guys. Chris Rump's still in his first year, so he's not had time to get that defensive ends room the way he wants it. Again, the defensive tackle room's full of a bunch of underclassmen, outside of Page and Trey Williams. So I think Easton's still kind of tailoring that thing to the way he wants it. A lot of young guys on the back end too, outside of R.J. Mickens and Tyler Venables, who didn't hardly play that much this year. So there's there could be a number of things that went into it, and maybe just hiring a defensive coordinator doesn't fix everything, but I think it's gonna fix a lot of things. I just don't think Clemson was aggressive enough on defense under Wes. You don't have to be like Brent Venables and get after, bring the house every down. And I know I'm exaggerating a little bit there, but I think there are times where you need to be aggressive, and I don't think Clemson's just been aggressive enough on defense. I think they've gotten to under West. They gotten to the point where they started playing more bend but don't break instead of being the aggressor and attacking. And we saw that with the offense for a few years. They were more about taking what they were given instead of going out and attacking. But that is definitely a question that is yet to be determined. Clemson women basketball making some noise as well. Yeah, I'm gonna have to take your word for that. Nah, I'm just kidding. I do not watch much women's basketball, so I can't really get get too deep into that. But yeah, it's been nice to see the improvement under Poppy for sure. Any thoughts on the pitching rotation? Obviously you start with Canuck. I think the McGovern kid probably gets a look, but beyond that, I don't know yet. Won't be long if we're starting to dive feet first into baseball, but um, the scrimmages I went to back in the fall, I didn't really see any of the main guys pitch. There's a lot of guys deeper down, the depth chart or however you want to describe it for a baseball team. But those, obviously Canuck's going to be one of those guys, and I don't have the roster right in front of me, but I would absolutely assume McGovern gets a shot. There's some other options in there too. I have to pull up the roster to remember everybody, but it won't be long, and we are going to start diving into baseball here. Matter of fact, I have all but decided that we're going to do a weekly baseball show, probably starting in February, right before the season starts. Me and another guy named Chris Wall. So if you're a big baseball fan, be on the lookout for that. But get back with me in a couple weeks. I might have a better answer for you on that. Do you think they reach out to Hobby? Yeah, I touched on this a minute ago. I I just don't know that Hobby. He got tired of the recruiting grind at the collegiate level. It's a big part of why he left and went and joined NFL ranks. And that was before, the portal and NIL where you have to keep recruiting your roster year after year after year. I just don't know that Hobby's open to coming back to this level. Who will coach linebackers, new hire, someone on staff? I don't see it being somebody on the staff. I might end up being wrong about that, but I just don't see it being that way. It's such an important position. I don't know that I just don't know who on the staff could do it. So if you hire a defensive coordinator that doesn't coach linebackers, I think you got to also hire a linebackers coach. I talked about Halfley a few minutes ago. No, he was not on my list. Again, he's kind of similar to Hobby. He left the college game for a reason, and I just don't know that he'd be open to coming back. How about Rex Ryan? That would be another intriguing one, man. I would, I can't say that I would be mad at Rex Ryan hire because I've always liked that guy. Um, his son played at Clemson, so there's some connection there. Um, but whether I've not heard his name mentioned as a legit candidate, is if I'm not mistaken, isn't maybe he a candidate for some at least one of the openings out there, or he wants to be. Maybe the Jets. I'm not sure. He's a guy that's going to come coach a defense at the college level, but I like Rex Ryan, man. I certainly wouldn't be all that upset with that one. All right, everybody's saying the audio is fine. Don't understand the hate on Banks. Sure, they got beaten badly by Ohio State. So did number one Oregon. Every coach has a bad game. Even Brent Venables had a couple of rough ones every now and then. He had his share, absolutely. Yeah, it's like I said earlier. Find me a defensive coordinator that hasn't gotten waxed a few times in his career, and get back to me. I'm probably going to be waiting a while because I don't think you're going to find one. But it's like I said earlier, man. You're not going to be able to make everybody happy, no matter who it is. It's not. There are going to be some people to say it wasn't a big enough hire, or he doesn't have enough experience, or he's not fiery enough, or he doesn't coach the right position, or he sucks wherever he was at before. You name it. But that's kind of the nature of the beast. The three candidates ranked in order. Of the names that I've gotten here, again, I already said Banks and Leonard probably be 1A and 1B. Probably, then Allen, followed by Santucci and Haynes. And that's really without putting a whole lot of thought into it. You know, I think Leonard's track record speaks for itself. He's a defensive backs coach. He's had a lot of success with pretty much everywhere he's been. I think it was at Wisconsin where he had some legitimate, stout defenses. And maybe he's a guy, even though he coaches DBs, you bring him in, maybe he can coach safeties, and Mike Reed coaches corners, and then you can move Mickey Khan into a different slot. Although, like I've said many times, I don't think Mickey Khan's some terrible football coach. I think the safeties have been pretty solid for the most part under him. But, I think Banks is probably a rising superstar in the coaching ranks, man. I think he's done great things with that defense in Tennessee. They have made marked improvement since he's been there. And then the Allen guy from Penn State, he's got the same kind of track record as Leonard. A lot of success. I know it's not been in the SEC, but you might not be able to find a guy that's coached in the SEC. Might not be any available. You have to hire who you can hire. And but again, of these five names, I kind of like all of them. You might be able to find some pros and cons with each one of them, but I don't know that you can go wrong with any of the five. Do I feel the new guy will be on the field or in the booth? That'll probably be up to him. Probably be up to him. Do I think Clemson has a shot with the Alabama line? Yeah, I think Clemson's got a shot with Alexander, absolutely. Um, I know this is kind of stating the obvious, but I don't think he even visits if you don't have a shot. He visited Auburn Saturday. He's going to be in Clemson tomorrow, and he said he was going to visit Ole Miss in Oklahoma. Now, if you're Clemson, you'd like to get that thing wrapped up and not even let him take those other visits. But we'll see how it plays out. But, yeah, I do think Clemson's got a legitimate shot here, yeah. Phil on Sports Talk made a comment about a private plane from Green Bay landing at the airport. There's been a lot of airplanes landing at the there's been one from Knoxville. There's been one from, you don't never know who's on those planes, man. I just, like Casey mentioned earlier, man, it's flight tracker season for sure. But we'll see what happens. But I know there's been at least one flight in from Knoxville, one flight from Clemson to Knoxville. Golly, there was another one, and I forgot what it was, but there's planes flying in and out of there every day. Yeah, now this is something I think you have to worry about. If you lose Mike Reed, you're probably going to lose some guys because a lot of those corners come to Clemson to play and get coached by Mike Reed. I mean, again, I think that guy's one of the best in the business, man. Reed is the best cornerback coach in college football, and Khan has proven to be a pretty solid safety coach. Don't understand why so many people seem to want to get rid of them. Me either. But a lot of times, people make up their mind on a coach, man, and nothing's ever going to change it. But the talk of people, the people talking about wanting to get rid of Mike Reed, I cannot wrap my head around that, man. I do not understand at all. Were the corners as good as you want them to be this year? No. You'd like to see them be better than what they were. But, man, Mike Reed's track record, man, that dude has not forgotten how to coach. Again, he's working with all underclassmen in that room this past season. That definitely impacts things. But, yeah, I agree. If you lose that guy, you better start worrying about losing some guys to the portal come spring window. Offense is loaded headed into next year. Antonio coming back, Wesco and Moore with a year of experience. Add Tyler Brown to that list too. There are a lot of weapons at K Klubnik's disposal next year. You got to get running back figured out, and you got to make sure you got more than one guy. I think Clemson really, really suffered from not really having anybody behind Moffa that was ready to go. You got to make sure you're not in that same spot next year, and I don't think they will be. But that passing attack should be fun to watch, even with Jake Brennistool moving on. You got to like what you've seen from Olsen Pat Henry. And, after having a year under his belt now to kind of, acclimate and that kind of stuff, Christian Betancourt is probably primed to take a big step next year. And then you still got Josh Sapp in there and Marcus Dixon. But, you might could have a two-headed monster at tight end with Pat Henry and Betancourt, and then those guys at wideout. I just thought Antonio improved greatly as a junior, compared to what we saw as a freshman, and he was a freshman All-American. If you can get Wesco and Moore to take jumps with him, I think they will. I mean, heck, I thought Moore took a jump from the first time we saw him earlier in the season to the last time we saw him. I thought we saw growth with him during the season. Same for Wesco too, but I thought there was more with TJ. But yeah, there's a lot to like about Clemson's offense, especially when you add in the fact that it'll be year 2 under Matt Luke, and you're getting 4 of your 5 starters back on the offensive line. The only guy you got to replace is Marcus Tate, and you got options, experienced options, ready to battle it out and step in to take over there. So you think about the offense next year. Yeah, it should be pretty good. You get running back figured out, and I think they will, man. There's some, there's a lot to like about Gideon. They fully believe that he can come in and win the job, and you get easy. You get those fumbling issues. If those fumbling issues I've heard about were true, you get those shored up, man. And having those 2 guys at running back is fun to think about, especially if Jay Haynes is fully healthy and ready to go by the start of the season. That's a pretty solid room. Alexander is being recruited by Peter Woods. From as soon as the announcement of Alexander hitting the portal came out, Peter Woods was, posting these cryptic tweet, or he at least one cryptic tweet, and I fully believe that was in reference to Alexander hitting the portal. They're former teammates there at Thompson in Alabama. So yeah, you absolutely use a guy like Peter Woods to help get him on board. Love to see. Yeah, I've seen a few comments about Brent Venables here. It's not going to happen. I get it. Everybody would love to have Venables back, and I understand why. He's the head coach at Oklahoma. He's not getting fired. They just extended him after the 2023 season. Man, his buyout's close to $40 million. They're not paying that right now to move on from him. So it's just not going to happen. Can Reed coach cornerbacks and safeties and hire linebackers coach? Reed's probably certainly capable of coaching safeties, but now that there's no limit on how many on-field assistants you can have, you don't really need to do that. And again, a lot of that's going to depend on what position the new guy coaches. Those are things that are going to have to be worked out. If your defensive coordinator coaches linebackers, then you don't really have much of an issue. But as say you bring in a guy like Tim Banks who coaches safeties, then you got to decide what to do there. Bring in a guy like Jim Leonard who's been known to coach corners, got to decide what to do then. But I mean, I think Reed would certainly be capable of coaching safeties, sure. But with the limit on the on-field assistants no longer in place, you don't have to worry about giving one guy too much responsibility. Is Ben Boulware on staff? Yes, he was he was a first-year assistant linebackers coach last year. So he's just started his coaching career. So yeah, he was there last year. I would think though that, with that being his first year, he probably did a lot more watching and learning than he did anything else. Not to say he never, helped coach anybody, because I absolutely saw him helping with some guys back in fall camp. We get to go to, they let us in for 3 practices and very small windows. We don't get to stay long, but, I saw him helping coach up a couple of the walk-on guys. But as a first-year coach, I wouldn't expect he was heavily involved with those things. The way the Chickens are playing, we may have a quad 3 loss by the time the season ends. It's possible. They got kind of waxed the other day. They certainly. I don't know what it is, man, but this year before last, the last two times Clemson's gone to Columbia, those guys play out of their minds and way above what they are. I don't know what it is, and Clemson didn't really play well in Columbia a couple weeks back, but it could very well be a quad 3 loss by the time the season ends for sure. It is reported Banks is really sitting on his new contract. That might be a sign. Yeah, I've seen that too. And I would absolutely take that to mean that he is open to moving on. Now, does that mean he will eventually move on? No. But the fact that they were not able to work a new deal out, and it seems like he would absolutely be open to a new gig. Can't believe South Carolina got Aaron Nolan. I don't know why. They were about the only one willing to at least come close to pay what he was asking for. I know there were a handful of schools that he reached out to, and they told him no, they were not going to pay him that. We're talking about a guy who was fourth string at Ohio State, who just lost their starting quarterback and made no effort to keep Nolan. None. That tells you what they thought about the chances of him winning the starting job there next year. South Carolina was 100% in the market for an insurance policy in case Sellers gets hurt. He's a guy that runs a lot, and they decided to invest heavily not heavily, but they decided to invest in a guy like that. If you want to pay that much for a backup, some people will, not many, which is part of why he ended up there. Do I think Riley is better than our previous offensive coordinators? I think Garrett Riley's still growing as an offensive coordinator. He's still a young guy, man. What has he been a coordinator now? 5 years, 4 years, 5 years. He's not this seasoned veteran. I like Garrett Riley. I thought he was the right hire at the right time. Clemson had that same offense in place for years, and it had become stale. It had become very predictable. They needed somebody that could come in and, kind of revamp it and, bring in something fresh and some new ideas. And I just don't know that Brandon Streeter was that guy. If the old system hadn't become stale and was still working, I think Brandon Streeter's probably the guy for the job. Just didn't work out that way. I think that was part of the issue over at, part of the issue, toward the end of Tony Elliott's tenure. Not all of it, part of it. Future quarterback play was as big of a part as anything. But, I just think the offense had gotten stale and, kind of needed a reset. So you needed somebody that could come in here and do that. And I think Garrett Riley, was as perfect of a choice as anybody that was out there, really. But, I like what I've seen from Garrett so far. Does that make him better than the previous offensive coordinators? I don't know. I really like Tony Elliott when the offense was, still fresh and clicking, and you had Deshaun Watson and and Trevor Lawrence running it. When you got guys like that, man, they really can make an offensive coordinator look really good. Um, if you got the right system in place, I think Brandon Streeter probably does fine as a play caller. He showed that he could have some success as an offensive coordinator at Richmond. They had a couple of really good offenses there under his leadership. I just think he just had to bring in. I just think he had to make a move there and bring in a new offense, and I just don't know that Streeter was the guy to do that. Besides youth, what is Dabo looking for in a defensive coordinator scheme? I don't know that, that if Jim Leonard's a candidate, that tells you he's not really looking for anything specific because he's kind of been more. Dabo's always been more of a 4-3 guy, and that's not Jim Leonard. Um, or at least a 4-man front guy. They went and played a lot more nickel this year and last year, but um, again, that's not Jim Leonard. So if he's a candidate, it tells me that he's kind of open to anything at this point. I don't know that he's restricting himself scheme wise, but he has always preferred a 4-man front and base 4-3. Speaking of recruiting, any work on some possible changes to get recruiting back on track after the low rankings this year? I think the biggest thing that hurt Clemson this year was, people coming in, schools coming in and offering their guys just far more money than Clemson was able to offer. And I have talked in depth here about some of the weaknesses that I perceive with the way the NIL stuff was being run at Clemson. Now, it looks like they've kind of, dedicated themselves to making some changes there and shoring some things up. And if you just look by or go by who they have been able to keep and re-sign this season, guys that are coming back for next year, that's pretty good evidence that they got a little bit of money coming in to work with. To me, that's been the biggest thing. You got to be able to go out and, have the money to spend on some of these guys. And I think that hurt Clemson big time last year. And I'm not saying you got to go out and outbid everybody because you don't. Clemson's just got to be able to be competitive with their offers. I know there are guys that are coming back next year that could have left for bigger offers at other schools. I mean, I know that for a fact. But Clemson was able to make a competitive offer. And, there are other things that they like about Clemson, so they just stay at Clemson for a little bit less money. So if you can start making competitive offers again out on the recruiting trail with some of these high school guys, that's going to go a long ways towards helping you get back to where you need to be from a recruiting ranking standpoint. Because all but one of those guys those decommitments from last class, all but one of them, it was, at least 5 of them were all about money. A sixth, money played a big part in. I just won't say it was the only reason, but they were just getting, substantially outbid, and they got to find a way to be able to make competitive offers and be competitive in the market. If West were to take another job, does that remove the buyout responsibility? Not completely, but it will mitigate it some. If he takes another job and makes $500,000 a year, then that comes off the buyout. It's been a while, but will Tristan Smith regain his years of eligibility? I don't have an answer for that. I asked Dabo about that right after they signed Tristan, and he said he wasn't sure yet, but I think it's a possibility that he gets at least one back, yeah, since he started out at a JUCO. Because I want to say that most of those guys are at least getting 1 year back. I don't know that it's automatic. You might have to apply for it. I can't remember how it works, but I do think it's a distinct possibility he's getting at least one back. What are the chances Rump gets another level out of Lawson next year, in your opinion? If Lawson can take another step with his run D, I think he'd be, solid. And I'm a big fan of Chris Rump. I just don't know that the guys in that room or some of the guys in that room necessarily fit what he looks for in a defensive end and the way he coaches and his style of coaching and stuff. Not saying the way he coaches, like the technique he looks for and stuff. I'm having a hard time putting this into words. But not his coaching style per se, but the way he coaches and the type of athlete he's looking for. But yeah, I do think there's another step Lawson can take, particularly when it comes to his run defense. Looks like teams took advantage of the side of the line where Parker was not. A lot of the time, yes. Does the new defensive coordinator bring in his own guys? Garrett Riley was not allowed to bring in his own guys. Brent Venables was not allowed to bring in his own guys. So I would say the new guy's not going to bring in his own guys either. Now, does that mean he can't bring a guy or two with him to be an analyst or something? Maybe. I mean, that's always a possibility. But is he going to come in and bring his whole an entirely new coaching staff in? Nah. Yeah, Zaire Patterson's still on the team. He's been hurt more than healthy, but he has definitely been a guy that has not lived up to his lofty recruiting ranking. Who is Tim Banks, the defensive coordinator at Tennessee? Mayo should get a lot of playing time. Yeah, I'm big on Darian Mayo, man. I thought he was a guy that if he would have been enrolled early, maybe he gets a little bit more of an opportunity this year. But he, not enrolling early, he just wasn't ready. But man, you talking about a big, long, athletic guy. He's 6'6", 6'7", 265. That's what he was when he came in as a freshman.
He's physically ready to roll, man. And if you see him up close, man, he is a mountain of a man. That is a big old dude. Heck, you don't see many 6'6", 6'7" defensive ends. See, we'll see if his height gets used against him. But yeah, he's absolutely got a shot of being in the rotation. He'll be up to him. Sellers had 19 yards on 11 carries in the Gamecocks bowl loss. He made us look like we were standing still when he single-handedly led them to victory against us. Was that scheme or poor execution? It was hard to watch for sure. I think it was a little bit of both, to be quite honest. Sellers, don't just use the bowl game as your sample size. He had a lot of success against a lot of different teams running the ball this year. He did make Clemson look silly, though. They had mostly held him in check over the first three quarters. Using they were playing out of a base 4-3, but suddenly in that fourth quarter, West decides they're going to run nickel, and they take Sammy Brown out in favor of an extra safety, and he goes crazy in that fourth quarter, man. Even though Sammy Brown only played 4 snaps in that fourth quarter, he still led the team in tackles that day. I don't think, let's say for whatever reason, Dabo had decided to bring West back. I don't think there's a lot of people in the Clemson fan base that would have that will never forgive West for what happened that day with Sellers having that kind of success running the ball and Sammy Brown just standing directly behind him, basically in his back pocket, waiting for him to tell him to go back in. I just don't think he'd ever come back from that. So I think Clemson played a lot of nickel this year, a lot of 4-2-5. That's with 2 linebackers and an extra defensive back. They started playing a little more 4-3 when we got towards the end of the season, but it didn't, it helped against Virginia Tech. They went away from it some against Pitt when Woodaz was hurt. And the 4-3 helped them against South Carolina for the first 3 quarters, but when they took Sammy out, man, I can't even remember what the numbers were in the second half, but it was abysmal. But they ran a lot of 4-3 against Texas, and Texas ran for almost 200 yards, man. Clemson gave up over 1,000 rushing yards over the past 4 games, or the last 4 games of the season. One of those was giving up 280 something to the Citadel. So I think there's a little bit of poor execution, and I think there's some schematic issues too. Think the Illinois defensive coordinator should be the choice. I can't. I'm not going to say I've not heard his name at all, because I have. But I've not heard it to the level I've heard these other 5 guys, and I would not dislike that one either. I like what he's done in Illinois too. Interested to see how well Tristan Smith will do next year. Yeah, I'm kind of he's intriguing, man. He's not a burner. He doesn't have elite level speed, but he's 6'5". He gives the offense something it's not had in recent years. He's that big, long target that can go up and win those 50-50 balls. I don't foresee him coming in and winning a starting job or anything like that, but I absolutely think I think he will be able to contribute. If you get 400 receiving yards out of him, that's a win, in my opinion. But I think where he can really make a difference is in the red zone. My man here's saying Smith could be dangerous in the red zone and on jump balls. That's kind of what I see him being in this offense. It's a pickup that I really like. Think a new defensive coordinator will require to put more pressure on his assistant coaches. I think that's a pretty safe assumption. That might be an area Wes lagged in. Just having been around him some and knowing his personality. I've tried to imagine some of the defensive meetings with Wes running them and stuff, and I just don't know that he's a guy that, when he walks in the room, he commands the attention of everybody. And if you got a guy like that leading your defense or leading one of your units and he doesn't command the attention of everybody, there's probably you probably got a problem. So yeah, I do think the next guy's got to be somebody that can, absolutely command the respect from everybody under him. Saw an article that noted Wes overprepared his game plans and left tons of it unused in the games that may have frustrated other coaches and players. I can see that being, I could absolutely see Wes being a guy that overthinks things to the point where it hurts you. So yeah, and if you put a bunch of stuff in a game plan and you practice and prepare for it all week and then don't use it and it happens over and over and over again, yeah, I could see that leading to some frustration if that's actually how it played out. Woodaz is undersized and slow. Do you see Clemson going after the Georgia linebacker? No, I don't. I don't even know who it is, and I don't see Clemson going after a starting linebacker to take Wade Woodaz's place. I do not know if that's Paul Wall's brother. To be quite honest, I know Chris through a friend of mine, and my buddy. Matter of fact, his name's Andy Navarro. I told him I promised I'd give him credit for it. Floated the idea of doing a show with Chris because he's such a baseball guru, man. And as soon as he said it, I'm like, that sounds like a great idea. So I don't know who his siblings are, so I don't know if it's Paul Wall's brother. Tune in when we start it up, and you can ask him. Jaden Blue's 77-yard run against Texas was Parker's side, maybe a one-off, but Parker and Woodaz without a phase on the play, playing a 6-1-4. Yeah, I didn't say every time it came to Parker's side, but it was way more often than not. I mean, to the other side of Parker, but way more often than not, they would attack the other side. How imperative Is it to perfect the coaching staff, knowing that after next year there may be a mass exodus from the team? I think it's imperative to get it right regardless. Um, you've got the pieces in place to be able to potentially make a run next year. Forget what's leaving. Um, you want to take advantage of those guys while you got them. So you need to get the coaching staff right just for that reason, if nothing else. But um, you always want to have the right guys in place. You know, from a recruiting standpoint, anyways. No matter who's set to leave or who's set to return or whatever. You know, you just you need a guy in place that kids want to play for. Um, a guy that has a scheme that kids feel like they can be successful in. To me, that doesn't really matter whether there's a mass exodus after next year or not. You need that kind of those. You need that kind of coach in place either way. Super excited about baseball. I believe Backett is bringing a chip to Clemson. Somewhere I tend to lean. Clemson will be back in Omaha sooner rather than later. I fell in love with Backett the day I met him the very first time. I knew a little bit about him because he was a candidate when Monty got hired, and from what he did at Michigan, but I didn't know a ton about him. But man, the first day when he was introduced as Clemson's new coach, and that day I got to meet him, I knew it right then, man. They had the right guy. If you're a baseball fan, you hope Eric Backett sticks around for a long time, and it sounds like he wants to. Henry is from Illinois. Banks, Henry, and Santucci. Who are you most excited about? I'd be fine with any of the three. I really like what Banks has done at Tennessee. There's a lot to like about Santucci. He's really aggressive. I don't know quite as much about Henry, but I'd be, again, 1A and 1B for me would be Banks and Leonard. And Leonard's a name I've heard a few times here of late. Allen's another name I've heard. Henry, Santucci. I've even heard Brian Haynes. Those three guys right there, Banks, Henry, Santucci, and Leonard, would absolutely be my top four. Wood, Banks, and Leonard probably at the top of the list. But I don't think you could go wrong with any of those guys. Be fine with Banks, Leonard, Henry, Santucci, or the guy from Texas. I've not heard anything legitimate about the guy from Texas being a candidate. All right, we have run way over again. I'm trying to scroll these last comments. Make sure I didn't leave out anything. Give me 1 minute here. I'm trying to find one I missed somewhere up here. Are there any special team coach positions that would be addressed in the offseason? Seems to be a coaching by committee approach and a new, more aggressive, innovative approach. I've not heard anything about special teams coaches, but somebody said down here something about a special teams coordinator. Clemson does have a special teams coordinator. They've got, I have to go back and pull the thing up, but I can't remember if there's two or either three coaches that are responsible for nothing but special teams, and then Mike Reed kind of oversees it all as the special teams coordinator. So it's not like you've got just coaches part-time on special teams, part-time on something else. They do have fully dedicated special teams coaches. Two or either three of them. I want to say it's three. And then Mike Reed on top of whatever that number is. Is Davison good enough to start next year at running back? They think he is, yes. I mean, he's got to come in and win the job, but they think he's got kind of potential. Actually, Alexander was a linebacker at Alabama. Started outside and moved inside, if I'm remembering right. He's played mostly on special teams, since he's been there. Clemson recruited him as an end. If West goes to Oklahoma, Clemson would owe him the difference. They wouldn't owe the full buyout. Whatever he makes at Oklahoma would come off what they owe him. Riley is showing he can be the guy. He still has a lot to learn in crunch time, adjusting to elite defenses. The game against Texas. I'm a big Garrett Riley guy. Again, he's still young. I think sometimes people forget that he's not been an offensive coordinator for 10 or 15 years. He's really just getting started in this thing, and I think he's got a pretty bright future ahead. Yes, Clemson lost a defensive end to Duke. They lost a safety to Georgia Tech. They lost some others to some smaller schools. That is the way the NIL world works. Duke isn't going to throw a bunch of money around at a bunch of different kids, but they've got enough where if they want to raise a bunch and throw it at one or two kids, they can absolutely do it. Look at the quarterback they just landed at the portal. Look at Bryce Davis, who they wooed with a big offer. Although people tend to forget that mama and daddy wanted Bryce Davis at Duke to begin with. They wanted him to get that Duke degree and stay close to home. So that was a big factor too. But the money, yes, Duke absolutely came in and poached him with a big time money offer that Clemson could not match. This is a different world we're living in now. Any team can poach a guy from one of these big name brand teams like Clemson or Ohio State or Georgia or Alabama. Just got to come up. You just got to raise the money, and Duke's certainly capable of doing it. Baseball talk's coming, I promise, man. Once we get a little bit closer to the start of the season, me and Robert's actually planning on going to Texas for the Shriners Classic or whatever it's called, the tournament to start the season. We're gonna do a baseball specific show every week. I hadn't decided what day yet. I got to get with Chris and see how he wants to do it. I kind of just been waiting for the season to get a little bit closer, but it's coming. I promise. There just hadn't been a whole lot of baseball to talk about just yet. Did see, since we've been on the air, that Devin Parks has transferred to JUCO school. So he will no longer be on the team. Perhaps put West back to the position he held before becoming DC. I think that was an option, and sounds like he was not interested. Tay Harris left for like 1,000K more. Yeah, I don't know how true that is. Whatever the number is, you got to start thinking about it in multiples of 3 or 4. Let's just say, for example, it was 100,000, which that's 100,000 per year minimum. So you're talking about, if he only stays for 3 years, you're talking about a $300,000 difference. If he stays for 4 years, we're getting closer to $500,000. There's a big difference. I mean, don't get me wrong, these deals run year to year. But when you're one of these kids, and let's say Clemson or Georgia Tech offers you 300,000, Clemson offers you 200,000, you feel really good about making more your second year and more your third year. Those things, that $100,000 per year starts to add up when you start talking about a 3-4 year period. Although 100K is not the number that I've heard. I mean, it wasn't like a $500,000 difference or anything, but it was more than one. And, Georgia Tech's throwing around some money in this last recruiting class. Look at that. Look at some of the guys they signed. They're building something over there, man. They might be really good in a year or two based on some of the moves they were able to make with the 2025 class. They can keep that momentum going in 26 and do the same thing. Watch out. Jordan Young said after he decommitted that part of the reason why he decommitted was because Clemson's recruiting class and they didn't have no other defensive backs committed. If you're the only safety committed in the class, if that's me, I'm a big fan of that because I got a much better shot at earning some playing time. But there's no kid that's going to come out and say right now, hey, so-and-so just offered me more money. Area 6'5". Who do I see as running back one next season? Gideon Davidson. And you'd like, if it's me, you'd like to see EZ win the backup job. If Adam Randall is into too deep, I think you got a problem. I mean, don't get me wrong. I like the idea of moving Randall to running back, but if he comes in and beats everybody out but Gideon or everybody out but EZ, then you got a problem there. I don't think it's going to happen. I'm just saying if. All right. There's a lot of questions down here that I've already answered. So if I don't get to them, go back and watch the beginning. I think Wes is definitely good as an analyst calling plays. Maybe just isn't for him. Maybe not at this point. Again, I thought he was fine in his first and second year, but it might have got a little too much this year. I think going and joining Venables at Oklahoma might be the best thing he could do. Again, Venables kind of runs that defense. He calls it and everything. And that's part of the reason why Zach Alley left and took the defensive coordinator job at West Virginia, so he could run the show himself. Let Wes go to Oklahoma and kind of continue to grow and learn to be a defensive coordinator while he's with Venables. To me, that would be probably the next step or the next best step if they can work that out. When is Clemson playing the Savannah Bananas again? There's nothing scheduled right now. Eric did tell me that it was something he'd like to see them do every year, but that's not, a done deal by any stretch right now. The Bananas will hold an exhibition against the Dirty Animals in Death Valley. It's in April. I forget which day it is, but it's not the Clemson baseball team that they're going to play against that day. Yeah, he did tell me that he would like to make it an annual thing. Said he actually tried to get it done at Michigan, and the administration would never get on board with it. Comes to Clemson and they get it done pretty quickly. I am at most baseball games, especially on the weekends. You will find me at pretty much every one, even if I'm not working, which the last 3 years I've pretty much covered every home weekend series. Might not have to do as many this year, but I'm there either way. I got buddies that have season tickets there behind the visiting dugout. If you see me at a game, come say hello. Same for you, Carson. If you see me at the games, come introduce yourself. What are the odds Clemson wins basketball and baseball in addition to the football conference titles? I think Clemson's got a legit shot to win their first ever ACC championship in basketball this year. A lot of that's got to do with the league being down. I mean, don't get me wrong, but I could absolutely see it happening. I don't know how deep of a run they'll make in March, though. I'm not sure. I like the starting five, but I'm not sure about the depth just yet, particularly if Locken gets in foul trouble. And the baseball team absolutely has to be considered one of the favorites to win ACC championship. So yeah, it's a realistic possibility they can win it in all three. How should someone address me if they see me at a baseball game? Jason or JP will do just fine. I answer to both. I'd really like it if we could find a way to keep Eason and Khan, especially Eason. I don't see Eason going anywhere, man. And I, I'm not. The only way I could see Khan going anywhere is if they bring in a defensive coordinator that coaches safeties. And if that were to happen, maybe he just gets moved to somewhere else on the staff. What has Jim Leonard done, really? He inherited that roster. That's Broncos GM Peyton, who drafted the. Go look at his track record while he's been a defensive coordinator in the college level. Why would Santucci leave that if he's building something? Money. Clemson, they have shown a willingness to pay what they need to get the coaches they want. Not to mention the fact, Clemson is already an established brand nationally. Georgia Tech, not so much. What about Jay Haynes? Coming off an ACL injury, we'll see where he is come fall, man. I'm not 100% convinced that, let's say he's fully healthy. If you're a running back, man, sometimes it takes a while to start fully trusting that knee again. It might be, halfway into the season before he really starts to get going again. But we'll see. But I've said it before. I'm not. I like Haynes. I'm just not sold on him being an every down back just yet. He might end up proving me wrong. Um, I think he's absolutely a guy that can, contribute, and he can be the change of pace guy, scat back type guy. But if he wants to be an every down back, he needs to get a little bit stronger. We'll see where he is come the fall, though. Yes, I am not hard to find at baseball games. Even when I'm working and in the press box, I come out, at least 2 or 3 times during the game and I'm around. So I'm pretty easy to find there at DKS. Last one. A lot of people outside of Clemson don't really understand how appealing the school and area is to coaches on top of the willingness to pay a guy. Absolutely, 100%. You know, let's just use Santucci as an example. He's living in Atlanta there in the big city. Maybe he's a guy that prefers to not live in the hustle and bustle of a metropolitan area like that. I mean, I'm not saying that's what he is. I'm just saying maybe there's a lot of things that can factor in to those kind of decisions, money being one of them. And Clemson has absolutely shown a willingness to pay their assistants, market value and even go over that if needed. So I would think that the defensive coordinator position, if you're at Georgia Tech, and that's a step up if you go to Clemson. Maybe if you're at Texas, it's not a step up, but if you're at Georgia Tech, it's a step up. Tennessee, maybe some people will call that a lateral move. But if you're not happy at Tennessee and you're wanting to move on somewhere else, who cares if it's a lateral move if Clemson's going to pay you what you think you're worth? Thank you to everybody that's tuned in. Maybe we will set another viewership record this week, man. Like I said earlier, I appreciate everybody that watches, man. We have just shattered records the past 2 weeks. And doing it in the off season. Gotta like that. I promise we're going to start getting to baseball talk once we get a little closer to February. I promise it's coming. I want to thank my sponsors, A-Glass, 2 locations in the PD, one in Florence, one in Sumter, right there on Irby Street if you're here in Florence, right there on Carter Road in Sumter, 3325 Carter Road in Sumter, 2022 South Irby Street in Florence, right there near the Walmart, close to the Chick-fil-A. A-Glass for when you need a glass. All your auto glass needs replacement and repair. Get yourself a free quote today, myaglass.com. Right back here next week. Keep an eye on the site tonight. We got an update coming for you on the coaching search. A lot of other stuff. ClemsonInsider.com. Once again, I want to thank everybody that's tuned in and helped me set some records in the past couple weeks, man. I can't say how grateful I am. Right back here next Monday. See y'all then.